Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Inner Conquest, the world's greatest modern metaphysics channel. I'm your host, Jacob Edens, and today we will be discussing the concept of no gods, no masters. So what this means is essentially, right? So when you're operating through either, you could call it law of attraction, law of assumption, fourth dimensional thinking, lots of different great ways to essentially express what you would call metaphysics in this reality in terms of being able to, for lack of a better term, turn your thoughts into things, right? So express your will in a way that actually creates and cultivates the reality in the way that you would like it to unfold. So when you look at your self-identity and your self-concept, okay, what the primary issue is where we assign power values. So when you think of power, what is power, right? Power is the ability to essentially have your will influence whatever it is focused upon, right? Because remember, we are thinkers and we're focusers. So we have two aspects of ourselves that will never change. They are called the eternal guides of man, as Neville Goddard put it, which is essentially speech and mind. So your ability to think and your ability to speak will never go away. It doesn't matter if you lose your mouth. You can internally dialogue with yourself and you can internally entertain any imaginative state in which you choose to dwell regardless of your external circumstances, right? So a lot of the complicated dynamics of this reality come into play where if you were in a correlative reality to your mind would immediately, what we would call, manifest your reality. And you see this through a lucid dream or out-of-body states when people go to what Neville Goddard would consider a higher keyed version of reality, meaning a more sped up version of reality. Here, there is essentially the element of faith and persistence because this reality is keyed down in a slower reverberation of what you could call true reality. And that's why everybody gets so fucking frustrated and tired of this place, because it's like living in a molasses place sometimes. But you don't need to do that anymore, right? So when we think of things, right, number one, we want to understand that we assign power values to everything. So if we are coming from a self-concept that something is more powerful than us, that means that we give life to that thing, right? There will be no power given unto you unless granted by my Father in heaven, meaning that a higher keyed reality, a higher dimension of reality, your mental state, right, is a higher dimension than the physicalized third dimensional state, right? Because if I see something in my mind and I see a blue bicycle, I can change that bicycle's color in my mind immediately to purple or red or whatever I want. I have free will in that dimension, right? But if I have a physically manifested bicycle here and I want to change it to green or red or purple, I can do that as many times as I want mentally, but until I affix that and decide that that is how that bicycle is, it won't immediately construe itself. It will go through what you would consider a bridge of incidents, right? So if I hold a fixed frame that my yellow bicycle is now red, and every time I go into the garage, I go, that's actually a red bicycle. That's actually a red bicycle. That's actually a red bicycle. What'll happen is I will impress that enough to where the dimensional space within which that bicycle was manifested from, in the same way that an architect has a blueprint for his house and then the house forms around the blueprint, you will go through what is called essentially a bridge of incidents to see that unfold, right? And what happens is without the understanding of essentially what God is, right, in Scripture, which is the Father, which is the name I am, which is essentially what you in relation to your reality are seeing and focusing on, right? I am a great basketball player. I'm seeing in my mind making shot. I am a bad basketball player. I'm seeing myself missing every shot, right? What you frame in that higher dimension of awareness is essentially framing your identity as well. So focusing in this reality requires essentially what is called faith and persistence, which is also categorized as loyalty to the unseen, right? Because you understand that the creative genesis of all things comes from within you, right? That's essentially why why things in this world want to disconnect you from yourself, your own authority, and your own power, because if you can circumnavigate that power and essentially get you to see something outside of you as the power source, i.e. money or whatever, validation, etc., then you use that same God power to make that reality true, but that power is still coming through you, right? You may just be unconscious that you're doing it. So the coined term "no gods, no masters" essentially means you just stop doing that, right? You stop giving power to things and assuming that they have any power, right? What you understand is all power is within you. God is within you. That is the creative genesis of things. So when you see something that is displeasing to you, in the same way that if you have a bicycle that's hot pink, but you love the bicycle, you can go into your mind, and every single time you see it, you can change that mental picture as if you're seeing that bicycle the way that you want it to be. Now, what happens is if you oscillate between the two frequencies, because of the slower reverberation, reality is a little bit of a lag time behind it, right? So you can get what's called double-mindedness, where you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So your decision-making and your conviction is essentially the necessary ingredients and components to have this reality unfold the way that you want it to. So when you see something that is not the way that you want it to be, you want to be aware, am I giving power to this thing and or framing a mental dynamic in which this thing has the ability to rule over me? Because in 100% of cases, it does not. Essentially because you can always adopt the mental state of it being the way that you want it to be. And without the understanding that that is the actual core processing power that inputs the data from what you could call a blueprint reality into the game, then you're always having external gods within which you assign power values to and are thus subservient to by your own volition, by your own acceptance that they actually have power over you, which your will, because unconditional love is essentially unconditional power and potential, which is your source, right? Your source is unconditional love. Unconditional love means love can go into anything without conditions at any time, no matter what time or place, right? So when you understand that you are the source of unconditional love in your environment, that means that what you give your awareness to and what you accept is true about your reality and how you identify is essentially enforced with your own source of power, which is your own unconditional power plug, if you will. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and take your soul out of your body right now and see how effective your body is at staying alive. It can't do it without you. That's why people call you the source, because you have a power emanation from you. It's why when somebody walks in the room, you can sense their energy because they're emanating energy, right? So you emanate energy all the time. You are all power, all knowledge, all that stuff is coming out of you. That's who you are, right? You're infinitesimal, confined to a human experience, but even within that human experience, as long as you can adopt the state of you having what you want to have and not contradict yourself and be aware of exclusively that and or accept that reality from a mental plane before it has quote unquote manifested, then now you have the keys to what you would call the kingdom of God, which remember, God is unconditional love. The Father's name is I am. So when you say I am, you have unconditional power and potential. I am great. Right now you've conditioned that power and potential into you being great. I am a funny person. Now you've conditioned that unconditional awareness and power and potential into the condition within which you choose, which means you are the creator, right? You are a creator on the mental plane and on the physical plane. But you have to understand that your mind is the power source for your reality. Nobody external to you, nobody, person, place, or circumstance has any authority over that power unless you give it to them. And through things like understanding frequency, you can understand that oscillating your frequency will attract and magnetize people, places, circumstances, and events, right? That's why you're the center of your universe, universe, right? So when you understand that, what that means is that you're always meeting up with things, people, places, circumstances, and events. And if you think of yourself as a radio tuner and you tune yourself to a specific frequency, you will link up with people, places, circumstances, and events that are on that frequency. So when you are all power and potential, what that means is that you are the frequency that you want to calibrate to having and being who you want to be right now, because there's only right now. Even if you're thinking in the past, you're thinking of it right now, you're visualizing the future, you're thinking of it right now. So the best way to play this game is to understand that it's right now, in the same way that if you go into a video game like Skyrim, every time you're playing the game, you're playing it right now, right? There may be a clock in the background that's kind of fun for like cataloging, the concept of how time has worked, but it's always right now. So you want to think in terms of the now moment, because in that now moment, you have access to everything, right? Right now, you can see yourself as who you want to be and having what you want to have right now. And if right now you're seeing yourself as someone who doesn't have what they want to have and needs to do something in the future, then right now you're that person who's not where they want to be. So the concept of accurate, righteous thinking is thinking from what is called the end, which is the fulfillment state, which is the I am who I want to be now, and I have what I want to have now. And as you normalize that internal state in the same way that you work with something like a bicycle, right, where you see it's hot pink, but you love the bicycle and you want it to be crimson red, you just continually live and dwell in the mental state every time you're riding the bicycle as it's red. You're seeing it in your mind as red, even though the physicalized third dimensional reality is hot pink, because that mental state, that assumptive state, is where the genesis and power lies. Now, what also is worth understanding is that if you have a belief, which is a decision, that in order to have your bicycle be crimson red, you need to have money to do this thing and that thing, and because you don't have the money, now this thing is going to have that. So now you're trying to figure out, how do I have the money to get the bicycle to be crimson red? You've already created in the now moment an extremely complex dynamic of unsolved things, right? So you want to go straight to solution. You want to be solution minded. No, it's already like this. No, it's already like this. No, it's already like this, right? It is like this now. That's what fourth dimensional thinking is. It's going to the end and seeing it with vision as if it is the way you want it to be now. That's why visionaries are so looked up to, because they can see the future in their mind. They can see the potential and they can focus on the potential, and they can accept that potential as true now because they understand that their mental paradigm is the preceding blueprint progenitor to whatever is externally externalized. Could you imagine an architect going and saying, well, I see this house in my mind, but in order to do this house, I don't think it's going to be possible. Probably won't be doing this. How many houses would he build? No, this is the house right here. All right, this is good. This is coming like this. This is like this. These people, someone's going to buy it. This is the house we're building right here. This is what it is. See the finality of that decision? You decide and you enter that state as if it's done now, because in a higher plane, it is done now, right? In this plane, which is still the same plane, it's an illusionary aspect to essentially trick you and make you think that you don't have that God power within you, which is in turn enslaved a lot of people to what you could call a matrix or an assumptive reality that is a disempowered reality in which you are a victim, where you are subject to the reality, whereas consciousness is actually the dictator of reality, i.e. you see any fucking law of attraction thing, they're like, change your story. Why do you change your story? Because if you're dictating, like to an iPhone, you're dictating a story, the thing is just taking down the notes of the story and it's writing it and transcribing it for you. So when you go through reality as consciousness, as power, you are seeking to take the power from all the things that you said, well, I need this to have this. You want to destroy the conditions, right? Because you want to live in unconditional love, unconditional power and potential. And when you go in unconditional power and potential, what you're doing is you're seeing what you want to see from that fourth dimensional mind as if it's happening now, as if it is the way that you want it to be now, as dynamics working out well, as people showing up as the versions you want, as your life being in harmony and benefit and all of these good things, right? Because you have the ability to enter an antagonistic non-fulfillment state as easily. Because remember, that unconditional love, that unconditional power potential is always on board for whatever you want, right? You are the creator of your own life. You get to decide it all. So when you decide that all power comes from you and that you assign the power. So if you say law of assumption works, that's because you gave it power. If you say that law of attraction works, that's because you gave it power. If you say this is this, it's because you are exerting that source of life force energy, which is embodied through a human physical vessel, which is thought and focus, right? So your thought and your focus are your votes for what you are saying is true, and you make that true through your acceptance of it. In the same way that if you have somebody who's literally changed on the inside, they're doing all these things, but they did you wrong in the past, and you see them as a bad person, they can only show up in your reality to you as a bad person, because reality is much larger than you would have yourself be aware of all the time. It would make you go crazy if you're just aware of everything all the time. So in order to have a curated, cultivated, focused experience of the reality that you want, what you're doing is, in essence, when you're focusing, is you're selectively ignoring aspects of reality that are not in alignment with your ideal. So to tie that into a law of assumption type of situation, you look at biblical scripture through the eyes of what you could call Christian mysticism, which is essentially what the Essenes and the Gnostics talk about and whatever the fuck they were on about. Could have just said it in English, but we had a system where all that shit was suppressed, so everybody needed to put it in secret books. So what happens is you essentially are reclaiming all of your authority in your reality, right? And you weigh that with the fact that everybody else has the same authority, because everybody can assign power and meaning and value to things. That's why it's called a co-creative experience. So when somebody convinces you that this thing is a certain way and you accept it, you are essentially giving your power to that thought paradigm, and you are manifesting that in your localized sphere. And if you continue to manifest that in your localized sphere and you convince others, then you will co-create a dog shit reality. But you can also think and assume as if things are the way you want them to be. That's why your individual power is more important than any aspect of reality. Because no matter where you go in the world, you could be in the poorest country in the world, you could be in the richest country in the world. There are poor people and there are rich people. There are happy people and there are unhappy people. There are safe people, there are unsafe people. So by you designing your reality the way that you decide, and you cultivate it the way that you want it to be on your own authority and your own decision making for your own selfish purposes, you design essentially in your own field what you could consider your own heaven on earth, right? You are living in your own paradise, right? As if your entire fourth dimensional world is operating exactly the way you want it to. Everything's working smooth. You're getting what you want to get. Everything's fun. You have to be that version internally, and then that gets ramified, that gets expressed outwards into the keyed down, more quote unquote physical version of this reality. So as you master your own power, and as you take the power away from things outside of you and understand that you are the power, you are the potential, you are the intelligence, you are higher than the highest form of intelligence, because anything, even including some shit like AI, is just a mockery of a human collective intelligence, right? It's like role playing as human intelligence. That's why it's so stupid. Like, it just looks up shit on the internet and puts it into summary paragraphs. But people are like, oh, this thing is gonna kill us. Yeah, you're manifesting that potential where that can happen, because you're the power that created that fucking thing, and now you're saying that that thing is more powerful than you. So understand that your power and your potential is the utmost importance, and when you design and cultivate your life the way that you want it to be for your own sake, and see yourself and others in the best light possible as the most empowered, brilliant, great people, they have to show up in your reality like that. And if you do the opposite, they have to show up in your reality like that. And you can create hell as easy as you can create heaven, but it's all up to you. So I know you enjoyed the video. If you want to do coaching, feel free to click the link tree. If you have video ideas in the future, leave them in the comments section. And more important than any of that, go conquer, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.